Jesus is silent. He's present. He clearly, based on the text that we continue to read, has not rejected her, but he's just silent. I want to encourage you that when God seems silent, he has not ignored you. He hears you. He knows every hair on your head. He bottles your tears. He hears you. Be persistent. It might be a really long road, but be persistent. Keep moving forward. The third thing, great faith isn't discouraged by obstacles. So you notice in the midst of this, it's not just that she's faced this silence, but now the disciples are like, okay, get this lady away. Push her away. Send her away. She's already desperate. She's already faced silence. And now she faces discouragement from those who are closest to Jesus. Go away. You don't need to be here. It seems like she's got a big barrier between her and the thing she is so desperate to see, her daughter delivered. And every time she turns a corner, there's another barrier. I mean, can you imagine the hope that fills you when you see Jesus, but then when you speak, he's silent? And you're like, oh, maybe he just didn't hear me. But those that are closest to him go, why are you here? Leave. Get away. Can't imagine the discouragement that she feels in this moment. But I can promise you this. Whatever discouragement that other people offer you, it's up to you whether you're going to feed into that. When we become people of faith, we're followers of Jesus, but really people of faith, meaning that we trust God. We trust Him with everything that we are. Even when we hear all of the negative voices, we're able to just put those to the side and go, I'm not going to be discouraged by that because I know who God is, and half the time I know who you are too. So I know who God is, right? I'm not going to be discouraged. You're human. You can get things wrong. Even the best people, the most well-intentioned people, say really dumb things sometimes. But God remains faithful. God remains true. He remains steadfast. And so even in the midst of the obstacles that are coming her way with the disciples saying, no, send her away, she continues on. Now think about this. She's cried out. He's answered her not a word. The disciples want to send her away. But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In other words, Jesus is kind of saying, you don't fit the mold of who I came for in this moment. So, God's been silent. The disciples have pushed you away. And now when God speaks, He goes, I didn't really come for you. I just feel like most of us would have quit by step one. We would have been so discouraged that we're like, well, maybe God just doesn't want to do it and I just got to accept that. But man, I look at this lady's faith because her next step in the midst of that is that she came and worshiped Him. Great faith bows before Christ. That's the fourth point. Bows before Christ. So in the midst of all of these feelings of rejection, she says, you know what? Jesus is still God. He is still the Son of David, and He still deserves worship. And so she came and she worshiped Him, saying, Lord, help me. What a beautiful prayer. Yeah, I know it doesn't have all the frills and all the stuff with it, right? But it's really simple and it's to the point. And I don't know if you've ever been there before, but sometimes that feels like the only prayer that I can get across. And there's a lot loaded in that word help, right? And there's a lot loaded in that word me. But there's even more power in the word Lord. Lord, help me. In other words, I don't even know how to describe what I'm going through. I don't even know how to describe the emotions that I'm feeling. I don't even know how to describe the situations that I've found myself in. And maybe I've messed up, and maybe it's been other people that have messed up, and it's landed me here, and there's just all this stuff going on. Maybe I don't even know the truth of what's happening. Maybe it seems like the doctor has no answer. Maybe it seems like we're just going to fall flat on our face. And I don't even know how to pray anymore. But she just falls down, she worships, and she says, Lord, help me. Do you see through the midst of what feels and seems like rejection that her faith persists? It's almost like she can see the character of God well beyond anything that's in front of her. She bows before him. Lord, help me. Brings me to the fifth point. Great faith trusts God's mercy. He's told her, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Now, this idea of little dogs is not a scavenger dog. It's like a household dog, right? And so he says it's not good to take bread out of the mouths of children and give it to the dogs, right? We don't do that. Although my girls, I think, if they thought it came between them and Camo Dale, that I would feed Camo Dale first. And I assure them it's not true. But that's the reality, right? Like people over animals, so to speak. And so he lays this out for her. It's not good for the children to take the children's bread and throw it out to the little dogs. And her answer here, I love it. She says, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. She's not giving up. She keeps coming back. She keeps staying steadfast and persistent. She trusts in God's mercy. Like I was saying before, I think she can see the very nature and character of God, even whenever it doesn't seem obvious in front of her based on her situation. But she trusts in God's mercy. She didn't demand. She didn't become offended. She just simply trusted. And she believed that even the crumbs that fall from the table, that the dog will pick those up. Here's a misconception about faith. And I want to make sure this is very clear. Faith doesn't demand what God owes us. Because God owes us nothing. Nothing. Faith does not demand. Like, I don't decree and declare. Right? I don't do that. Because I'm only interested in God's declarations and God's decrees. I want what He wants. Your will be done, Lord, literally means I want His will, even if it feels harder for me. And so faith doesn't demand what God owes us, but instead faith simply trusts in the nature and the character and the mercy and the grace of God. Whatever your will is, I accept that and I know that it's good. Because I know who He is. I know that He is good. And He's not going to give bad gifts to His children. And so I'm going to walk through it. I'm going to trust. And I'm not going to demand things of God. I'm going to request, and I'm going to keep coming back over and over and over. And maybe God might just come back to me after I keep coming over and over and over and say, hey, listen, my grace is sufficient for you. That's what He did to Paul. My grace is sufficient for you. Or maybe it might be like this woman, where I keep coming back over and over and over through all the trials and through all the obstacles and through all the discouragement. And I keep coming back over and over and over. And then finally God says, okay, you got it. You're not just wanting something from me. You actually know who I am and you actually trust me. Trusting who Jesus is. It's not good to take children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she says, yes, Lord. Yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. It's like you have this complete shift, this complete change that happens based on the fact that she is trusting God for who He is. God is not an ATM machine where we just put things in and we expect something out. We don't just assume that He's going to give us whatever we have requested. But what God is faithful. What God is merciful. What God is all-seeing and all-knowing. What God is the one that we can trust when we feel like we can't trust anyone else. That's what this woman understood. She's like, you know what? You're right. You're the son of David. You're the Jewish Messiah. I'm not going to get offended over the fact that your primary mission is for the house of Israel. But Jesus also wants to remind you that I'm okay with some crumbs that fall off the table too. As if she's saying, if I just get a crumb of your mercy, I know that's enough. That'll satisfy my need. I don't need I just need a little bit. Because I know that a little bit will be sufficient. I know that you can do whatever you desire to do with just a little bit. Now, full disclosure, I have 5 points to this sermon, which would mean that you guys would be getting out really early today. Which would be terrible, right? We don't want to do that. So I came up with a bonus point. Blessed art thou. Let's keep reading the text. What happens if we continue going forward in the text? Now, I'll skip a little portion here, but essentially, once He has declared this woman has great faith, then Jesus departs and skirts the Sea of Galilee, and all of these people start showing up to Him for healing. And all of these miracles begin to happen. Verse 32. Now Jesus called His disciples to Himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. Then His disciples said to Him, where could we get enough bread in the wilderness to fill such a great multitude? Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7, and a few little fish. So He commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and He took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to His disciples. And the disciples gave to the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets full of the fragments that were left. Now those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Now, a little context here is that prior to this, we've had the feeding of the 5,000. We talk about that a lot, but there's a feeding of the 4,000. So we've had the feeding of the 5,000, and if you go back and you do a little study, you realize the feeding of the 5,000 was a primarily Jewish audience. Now Jesus is in a Gentile region, and this woman has come to Him who is a Gentile. And now all of the Gentiles have shown up to Jesus. And they've followed Jesus in this multitude, and He's been healing them. And they've been staying around, probably listening to Him teach. I mean, it's just been this whole thing. And then He looks around and He says, they've been here for 3 days and they haven't eaten. Do we have any bread? Now, I know that might seem like small and minuscule, maybe a crumb, if you will. But you know what's interesting about the conversation? Jesus has talked about bread to this woman. The context of Scripture moves us right into another conversation about bread. The woman has answered, even the little dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Matthew doesn't lose sight of that image of the crumbs falling from the children's table. And now as Jesus is surrounded by a predominantly Gentile audience, and the feeding of the 5,000 has already happened, but now there's 4,000 men plus women and children gathered around. He sits down, He takes 7 loaves and a few fish, and He begins to multiply it. So much so that there are leftovers. Now, if we know something about the Gospel of Matthew, what we know is that Matthew is writing to a primarily Jewish audience, right? And that's just kind of the gear. Like he wants to be able to show in the Gospel that Jesus is the new and better Moses. You know, those sorts of things. Like we see this line up time and time again. But I think this moment right here is where we see something really significant. Because again, we've just come out of this story with this Gentile woman who wants to see her daughter delivered. And her faith is persistent. And then we see that the Gentiles begin to follow Jesus. And they're asking for Jesus to heal them. And they're glorifying the God of Israel. They're recognizing who He is. And then when they've gathered around, Jesus looks and He has compassion. He says, I don't want to send them away hungry. And then His disciples said to Him, where could we go to get enough bread in the wilderness? And Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? They said, 7 and a few fish. I almost feel like Jesus is looking at him like, y'all know I did this before, right? You remember that one? Just a couple chapters ago. I mean, he wouldn't have said that, but... And He takes 7 loaves and He creates an abundance to where there's leftovers. The woman was willing to settle for a crumb because she knew it was enough. What Jesus is saying is, yes, the crumb would be enough, but I've got so much more. Because what this passage will culminate in is eventually Jesus at the end of Matthew saying, go into all the world and make disciples. Baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them the things that I taught you. What we begin to find out is that this gospel message is not just for Israel. That Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, but He's not just the Jewish Messiah. That He extends to all the world. Thank God, because I think that's most of us in here. That He reaches out and He says, you were just worried about a crumb, but I'm going to show you that there's even leftovers. This points to the very fact that God is merciful and that God loves the world so much. Or in this way, that He gave the bread of life. What you begin to realize is that the bread is actually Jesus offering Himself. And man, if I could just have a crumb of Jesus, it would be enough. It would be sufficient. His mercy would be abundant. And Jesus says, yeah, but a crumb isn't good enough for me. I'm going to keep going. Because my gospel is for the whole world. My gospel is for every tribe, every nation, every language, every ethnicity, every person. My gospel is for the whole world. Which brings us back to our bonus point. She asked for a crumb, but Jesus had a table. Quite literally, she's asking for the crumbs that fall for the table, and Jesus in response is saying, you know what? I have a place at the table for all the Gentiles. I have a place at the table for whosoever will. I have a place at the table for those who have cursed me in the past. I have a place at the table for those who have sinned. Thank God. I have a place at the table for anyone. And so the feeding of the 4,000 to this primarily Jewish audience is pointing something out. God's grace is abundant, and Jesus quite literally offers Himself. And there's enough Jesus to go around for Israel and for the rest of the nations. This isn't the new plan. This has always been God's plan. From the beginning, from Genesis moving forward, this is the plan. And can I tell you, the plan still stays true today. If you're here this morning and you don't know Christ, if you're here this morning and you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, or maybe you've come to a place where you're going, I'm not sure there's enough grace and enough mercy for even me. I've messed up. I've fallen short. I thought I was following Jesus, but now I've fallen into sin. I don't know where to go from here. And yet Jesus is just multiplying bread. There's enough Jesus to go around. His grace is abundant. His mercy is everlasting. It keeps going. The doors are wide open. Now don't get me wrong. Narrow is the gate, straight is the way, right? He's not saying like walk on through and do whatever you want. It's not how it works. But what he is saying is that anyone who wants to get on the path, it's wide open. Jesus made a way. And then what the amazing thing about that is that not only did He make a way to just get on the path, but then He gives us His Holy Spirit to lead us and to guide us into all truth and righteousness. Then He gives us His grace, and the grace of God which brings salvation to all men. Or the grace of God which has appeared to all men and brings salvation. This same grace, according to Titus chapter 2, this same grace teaches us. It guides us. It instructs us to where we don't just walk through the door and go, well, now I can do whatever I want. But we actually walk through the door and we go, oh, this is the way. This is the path. This is what it looks like to be conformed into the image of Christ. This is what it looks like to be more and more and more like Jesus. And so quite literally this story, even though it's face value, you might read it at a glance and go, boy, Jesus seems a little distant. But quite literally what Jesus is the opposite of distant. What Jesus is doing is saying, you know you don't belong, right? And she goes, yeah, I know. And he's going, well, you do now. You belong. You know those Jews, or those Gentiles, they don't belong, right? Yeah, we know that. Well, guess what? They do now. Jesus, we watched you multiply the fishes and the loaves for that Jewish audience over there, 5,000 men plus women and children. And he goes, yeah, and I'm going to do it for 4,000 men plus women and children for the Gentiles over here. Why? Because they belong too. Can I tell you there's room for you in the house of God? There's room for you in the family of God. There's room. Not room to stay in your sin. Room to be changed. Room to follow Jesus. Room to be sanctified. Room to be changed from the inside out. There's room to lay down your sin, take up the cross, and follow Christ. There's room. Whosoever will, let him come. Let him come. As we get a song to close today, my invitation is no different than Jesus's. Whosoever will, let him come. If you're here this morning, you've never given your life to Jesus, today's the day. Today is the day of salvation, right? Today's the day. Maybe today you've realized that there's enough mercy for even you, that Jesus, even in the midst of your sinfulness, He offers Himself. Let me let you in on a little tidbit here. All of us were there. It's a weird thing to step back and act like that we can judge somebody based on their sin whenever we know where we were. And we know what Jesus freed us from. And so no, we don't look down on that. We celebrate that you're experiencing the freedom that only Christ can bring, because we understand that freedom too. Maybe you're here and you say, I've been trying to follow Jesus. I gave my life to Jesus, but man, I just keep falling short. I keep falling flat on my face. And sometimes I just feel like maybe God has given up on me. His mercy endures forever. God has not given up on you. God still desires to change you. God still desires to deliver you. Be persistent. Don't give up on Him. He has not given up on you. Be persistent in your prayer. Believe what God's going to do. Believe that He's going to free you of your sin. Believe that He is going to move in your life in a very special and unique way. Believe and trust Him. Trust Him. Maybe you're here and you go, Austin, I have unstoppable faith. I have never doubted Jesus a day in my life. I want to celebrate you and ask you how you do it. And maybe you can teach all of us, because you might be pretty unique in that sense. Because I think we've all had the moments. But you know what we go through and what we experience and our doubts and our questions, they don't change who God is. He remains faithful. He's good. He's good. And so He's here, offering Himself, offering the bread. Lord, I'll take the crumbs that fall from the table. And He says, yeah, but that's not good enough for me. Let me pull you up a chair at the table. I want to sit with you. That's grace. That's mercy. If you're able to, would you stand? If you have a need to pray this morning, we would love to pray with you.
Page 320, room